I think it's a life skill to think long term. I think it's definitely a leadership skill, and it's underrated because if we don't make an effort to think long term, we won't, because we're just looking at what's in front of us. And so as a leader, you're setting the goals. And by the way, everybody's a leader in their lives. So look, measurable goals are super important. They will galvanize organizations. They help people focus. They provide clarity and direction. You know, John F. Kennedy said, we want to go to the moon, and they work. But most business leaders know that. What's underappreciated in my mind are the side effects of measurable goals. We all hate feedback, let's be honest. In business in particular, it's very hard to get feedback as at work. One of the most threatening phrases I can use is, can I give you some feedback? Oh, if someone comes to me and goes, can I give you some feedback? My heart rate goes up, the adrenaline rushes through my body. But let's just think about, why is that? Athletes love feedback.
Yeah.
And I studied sports psychology for the book, The Psychology of Leadership, and found so many concepts that apply to business and self-improvement. But athletes, they want feedback. They have coaches that tell them live, you're not holding your racket right. Like even the top athletes have coaches where they get constant feedback. So why do we hate it in business and in other areas of our lives? You can't tell someone don't react. What you can do, though, is learn to recognize and identify your reaction and be mindful of your reaction. So you take a microsecond when the insult is coming at you and you say, oh, you just tell yourself, oh, I'm getting really anxious and angry about this. And just that little micro pause of identifying your reaction, being mindful of your reaction, is going to help you handle those situations. But this control theory helps you to adjust along the way in your decisions, and it helps you frame your decisions. And that's where I introduce strategic patience, because we think of the ideal leader as the decision maker who makes decisions quickly and makes the right decisions. But some of the best leaders I've worked with were the best at exercising strategic patience.
Welcome to your journey to find true tranquility with the Tranquility Magazine podcast. With your host, Jasmine Maya Rowe. Today's episode featuring. You can find more information about Tranquility on our website, tranquilitymagazine.com.
Today, I'm really excited to have Sébastien Page. He has more than 2 decades of leadership experience. As an author, he believes breakthroughs often happen with experts venturing outside their field. That is why in the psychology of leadership, he went beyond finance and economics to study research in psychology. He is currently the head of global multi-asset and chief investment officer at T. Rowe Price. Sébastien is also a member of the editorial board of the Journal of Portfolio Management and the Financial Analyst Journal, and the board of directors of the Institute of Quantitative Research in Finance, Q Group. He regularly appears in media including Bloomberg TV and CNBC, and was recently named amongst the top 15 voices in finance by LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Sébastien, for your time. I'm excited to have you.
Jasmine, I'm super excited to do this. I'm taking a bit of time off on the West Coast, and so we're both on the West Coast on the same time zone here. So really happy to do this today.
You get to enjoy our vast amounts of sun.
Yes, I can guarantee you in that window behind there is sunshine.
Oh, it's a good day always in LA. So, my first question is always, what is your current mantra or state of mind?
I would summarize it as very current as have fun with it because I'm on vacation for 2 weeks. But career wise, it's think long term. I
Mm,
try to remind myself to think long term. As individuals, as business leaders, we don't do that nearly enough. And
mm.
it puts everything in perspective. It's such a just a powerful mantra. Think long term. It helps you stop worrying about the little ups and downs every day. And it centers you around your long term goals and ultimately your values. What do you want to achieve?
Yeah, very smart. I recently stumbled upon something that's kind of close to that, was separating yourself from a CEO to you're always working in the state of mind of being the grunt labor, and then how to separate yourself from the two because you need to have that more broad concept on where your company or your elements are going rather than focusing on the drudgery of getting one thing after another can be overwhelming without that broader viewpoint.
I think it's a life skill to think long term. I think it's definitely a leadership skill.
Mm.
And it's underrated because if we don't make an effort to think long term, we won't because we're just looking at what's in front of us. And so, as a leader, you're setting the goals. And by the way, everybody's a leader in their lives at home, in your community, in business. So, in your role as a leader, you're setting the goals.
Mm-hmm.
Set the goals, no one will. And you're responsible for focusing everyone, your family, your community, your business towards long term accomplishment. Long term accomplishment. I think that mantra, think long term, is underrated in business.
True. I think most people think, especially with your background being on the stock market, it's instant transactions, instant decisions that you don't think about how long term these tiny decisions that you're making now in the present tense will be affecting the long term results. So you do mention the view on the power of measurable goals. So what is that concept and explain the ways that it could be a valuable asset to kind of further understand?
So, look, measurable goals are super important. They will galvanize organizations, they help people focus, they provide clarity and direction. You know, John F. Kennedy said, "We want to go to the moon," and they work. But most business leaders know that. What's underappreciated in my mind are the side effects of measurable goals. A
Hmm.
lot of your most important goals are not measurable. For example, process goals. Are you good at what you do from a mastery perspective? In
Mm.
my business, in money management, are we good at uncovering original research? Are we good at exchanging ideas so that together we provide insights to our investors so that they make better investment decisions? These are all mastery process goals. They go beyond the measurable goals. And then, Jasmine, the other big part of it,
Mhm.
huge, is the risk of goal induced blindness. In
Hmm.
the research in psychology, goal induced blindness is a well documented effect that is negative.
Mm.
So, a lot of what I do in the psychology of leadership is take something that we all think is good and that is good, measurable goals, for example,
Mhm.
then provide the nuance with backing from research in psychology.
Hmm.
If all you see is your measurable goal and you have blinders on and you lose sight of everything else that's important in your life, it could be early in my career. For me,
Mhm.
it was my personal health and wellness. I was
Mm.
working and traveling nonstop. I caught a cold, it lasted for a year.
Wow.
Or it could be your sense of ethics. Famously, a lot of companies will cheat
Hmm.
because they're trying to fit success around those very measurable goals. And think of Wells Fargo, very prestigious financial institution. They had a goal of counting the number of new checking accounts they would open. And that's how they measured their success. And with goal-induced blindness, people started opening dummy accounts just to reach the goal, making up basically fake checking accounts. I remember I applied for a mortgage years ago with Wells Fargo, and they said, "Oh, we'll give you the mortgage, but you have to open a bank account." I was like, "Why do I need a bank account? I already have a bank account." So there are plenty of examples in business where the measurable goal gives you goal-induced blindness. And in the literature, in psychology, the most common example in those articles is Mount Everest. Because, if you want to reach the summit of Everest, you have a 4% chance of dying in the process. And there's a lot of goal-induced blindness that happens there. So those are some of the caveats around how awesome measurable goals are, because they work. They definitely work.
But also understanding your view on your world and your implementations on how you see things. And sometimes it could be, I guess they say your economic group or like connection. And that's important to figure out where you're getting your mode of thought and experiences from, which we're going to get into. But I want you to touch on what is a PRIMA model and how is it developed and the value of it as a concept to include.
Yeah, look, I'm in finance. We have a lot of acronyms. I hate too many acronyms in business. We have almost as many acronyms as people in technology. And technology is like acronyms galore.
Oh,
this one, this acronym I love. It's from positive psychology, and it's PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. And Marty Seligman, the father of positive psychology, coined that acronym where the P stands for positive emotions, what you and I try to experience every day. Getting likes on social media, having a laugh with a friend, enjoying a good glass of wine. Those are positive emotions. What matters for people's ability to thrive in the long run, not the P, is the IRMA, which stands for engagement, R, positive relationships, M for meaning, and A for accomplishment in the long-term sense of the term, going back to what we were talking about earlier. So in the book, I say P is like a sugar high. It's like a sugar high for your soul. PERMA is like proteins for the soul. Those are nourishing things. And I have in the psychology of leadership one chapter for each of those letters, how they relate to leadership situations, to self-improvement situations, and to business in general. So engagement, super important. Most employees, when you run a survey in America, are not engaged with their work. Why and what can you do about it? Relationships, toughest part of any leadership role is managing relationships. How do you do it? How do you handle feedback? M for meaning, in business, it's become popular to talk about meaning, start with why, blah, blah, blah. But how do you make this practical? And then accomplishment, what do you define as a long-term accomplishment? I set a 10-year target for our business. This is very unusual, actually. Most business planning takes place over a 1-year cycle, maybe a 3-year cycle, sometimes a 5-year cycle. But I've created a set of goals and a vision for where I want to take our business over 10 years. So IRMA is where the action is to improve your leadership style, how you run the organization, and to improve yourself as well. So I love it. I love PERMA.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good philosophy going forward that it has so many valuable understandings to kind of get your mind focused on the outcome on your mental health as well. And you mentioned something that basically brings to mind like quiet quitting. What happened before when people were unenthusiastic about their job, they were paycheck to paycheck, they just needed to pay their bills, and they were not motivated to do the work they were, supposed to do because it just inner focus was not there, that the passion was there. And so, kind of understanding that concept and what you're working on right now, and going back to what you mentioned before, having a larger spectrum of what your goals for a longer term. And I have heard in a lot of aspects about learning goal setting in periods of 1 to 5 to 10 years are very insightful ways of focusing on your goals, but they could change and they can deviate because you always have to pivot. But going back to what you said about improving feedback, this one is a very particular dance in my experience. And we're in, the California area that everybody's very sensitive on this topic. And so I want you to expand on what to do and how to utilize this particular aspect.
We all hate feedback, let's be honest. In business in particular, it's very hard to get feedback as at work. One of the most threatening phrases I can use is, "Can I give you some feedback?" Oh, if someone comes to me and goes, "Can I give you some feedback?" My heart rate goes up, the adrenaline rushes through my body. But let's just think about, why is that? Athletes love feedback. And
Yeah.
I studied sports psychology for the book,
Mhm.
The Psychology of Leadership, and found so many concepts that apply to business and self improvement. But athletes, they want feedback. They have coaches that tell them live, "You're not holding your racket right." Like, even the top athletes have
Mhm.
coaches where they get constant feedback. So,
Yeah.
why do we hate it in business and in other areas of our lives? There is fascinating research by Dr. David Rowe. He's an expert in neuro leadership. He's almost invented that field.
Mm.
Studied feedback specifically, and he has this hack, basically. It's a trick to make feedback much easier for the person receiving it, but also for the person giving it.
Mhm.
And this is the trick. All you have to do is ask for the feedback.
Mm.
Makes a huge difference. So if
Yeah.
you're a leader, go around at work asking for feedback. How did I do? How did that go? Could I have done this better? What should I do next time? And then you're modeling that behavior. His research showed that the stress response from giving or receiving feedback when the person asked for it
Mhm.
was much lower, 30, 40% lower. They had people hooked up to monitors and sensors and so on.
Mhm.
What an easy trick. And if you start practicing it, you can make it forward looking, right?
Mhm.
Instead of, "What did I do wrong?" You can just
Yeah.
say, "What can I do better next time?" Or, "How would you do this differently next time?"
Mm.
And then there's much less stress around it, around the feedback. But yeah, we all hate it. Jasmine, let me ask you, can I give you some feedback?
I always love feedback, but I grew to learn to love it. And you're
Yes.
right, because it comes from like sports understandings, you got coaches, you got people giving you feedback because what you said before, you got those blinders on when you don't have feedback and you don't know how you're doing. But I think it's so wise to be humbling as a leadership perspective too, because that could be, oh, I didn't do great, I didn't do well, they're wanting, to give me feedback. But the fact is that the more you know about your employees and their perceptions, the more open to that, exchange and the, reinforcement of what you're doing as the leader of a company, that you can see broader, in my understanding, more abilities to kind of focus on people's different frame of mind and what you could implement to grow your company, as you mentioned.
Yes. And for me, I I have to admit, I've historically had a hard time receiving feedback
Mm,
because I was too sensitive to it.
yeah.
The thing is, the research shows that the feedback you receive reflects almost as much about the person giving it
Mm,
as it does the person receiving it.
yes.
So
Mm,
when you receive all this feedback, and at work we do these 360 peer reviews, it's anonymous, and everybody you work with
hmm
will give feedback and your manager will summarize it for you. You have to remember that some of it reflects the attitudes, the worries, the concerns of the person giving the feedback to you. And while feedback is incredibly helpful to improve, some of it you just have to discard. And that's been really hard for me to actually learn to discard
mm.
feedback that I thought maybe was hurtful, or you have to have enough self-confidence to say, I'm taking that part of it because I think I can improve from it, but that part I'm going to ignore.
Yeah, I mean, you get different perspectives here in Los Angeles. One is don't read the comments. Never go to the comment section too much because you don't want to receive some people's
Yeah.
perspectives that are maybe outside your wheelhouse and expertise, or it could lead into someone that's just jealous or feeling inferior that just wants to lash out for some reason. And I'm with you on the way that feedback was not a beneficial being an artist and doing music. It was like the last thing you want is someone's feedback on your creation that is your baby or your gift, and you want to be open to it. But it took me a long time to be on the focus of being open to feedback, because if you're doing something creative, it's hard, because being an artist, it just hurts. You're like, oh wow, I did something beautiful that I love.
Yeah.
Now it's just like, oh, okay, well now I have to reframe my own inner worth to figure out how good I feel about what I just made.
Yeah, I get it. And writing a book and getting editorial feedback
Ooh.
can be very difficult. It's a
Mhm.
process. I've had to learn to embrace it. And again, discard the part of the feedback that I don't need. But you know what? You know what's fascinating about this, especially with social media, right? You get this mean comment and
Mhm.
you spent hours writing this blog or this article
Mhm.
or this creating this piece of music, and you get this mean comment and it hurts, and your body responds to it, like you can feel like this is doing something to you.
Mhm.
But then you think about who wrote that comment, and
Mhm.
if I met them in real life, would I want their approval? Would I care about their approval?
Mm.
And I guarantee you 99% of the time, probably not. It's a 14-year-old who just wants attention on the internet.
Mhm.
And if you came across that person in your life, or if they were like your cousin or something and you knew them, you
Yeah.
go, this doesn't affect me at all what you think. Because it's in writing. This is a problem with social media. It's in writing for everyone to see as well. But the reality is that you get these mean comments, and now it's just everybody knows to just ignore those, just brush those aside, because half of them are bots, half of them are people just the other half basically are just people just looking for attention. So I make it sound easy. I mean, these things can be really hurtful, and
Mhm.
I try to avoid them as much as I can, to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, two topics are going to come out of this in a way that they're about your own perspectives and how you suggest how to manage your emotions is first. So when you get into, we're talking about, the social media sphere, so to speak, and you're getting into creating something you love. And no matter who it is, sometimes this one may come to mind for you. Your pride is wounded. So, how do you reframe your emotional stature to kind of deal with something like that?
Yeah, I talk about neuroticism as a personality trait. And if you're high in neuroticism, you tend to be anxious about results that have yet to come out, or you tend to react emotionally to a lot of situations. And if you're low in neuroticism, you're kind of cool as a cucumber, and these things don't get to you. But what I say about personality in the psychology of leadership is that, first of all, it doesn't explain all your behavior. You have to take it as something that is maybe 30 or 40% correlated with how people behave. It's not entirely inherited as well. And here's what most people don't appreciate. You can change your personality. Think about it. You probably don't have the same personality in different groups in different settings. And you can become less neurotic. You can build tolerance. You can become more conscientious. So this idea of changing or evolving your personality sounds odd or inauthentic, but it's actually a huge area for self-improvement. So, how do I learn to not overreact when someone says something mean or when I sense the fight or flight response? If someone says, "Can I give you some feedback to go to our earlier discussion?" There are tricks that you can use that are super easy to do, but you just need to remember to do them. There's a lot that's been said about breathing. I thought it was trite. I didn't want to put it in the book, but then I thought, I'm actually using this, right? I go on live national TV to talk about my investment views and debate them. So I'll get questions that'll be devil's advocate types of questions. It's nerve-wracking. I'll be there for 5 minutes. I have to get it right. I don't know what they're going to ask. So right before I go in the air, I do 4x4 breathing. I take 4 seconds to breathe in. I hold 4 seconds at the top. I take 4 seconds to breathe out, and I hold for 4 seconds at the bottom. I do that for a couple minutes right before I go live. And this helps me a ton. It's a bit of a roundabout way to get to your question, but the mindfulness aspect is huge too.
Yes.
So you can't tell someone don't react. But what you can do though is learn to recognize and identify your reaction and be mindful of your reaction. So you take a microsecond when the insult is coming at you and you say, oh, you just tell yourself, oh, I'm getting really anxious and angry about this. And just that little micro pause of identifying your reaction, being mindful of your reaction is going to help you handle those situations.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important, a lot of the things that you bring up in there. One, for the most part, I call it ocean breathing. And there's also a form of concept that for people going into engagement in a war context, or police officers use the same circle breathing in a way to kind of reset their awareness and prepare to go into and resolve the issue or prepare for what action is happening. Then I think it's so important to have those moments to settle in and kind of recompress yourself to prepare what's going to happen in the future, which you're doing for your interviews and everything like that. Could be like, zingers and very fast conversations, and your mind has to work really fast to kind of solve the problem to dictate it in a professional manner. And also it could be wounding in its own way. So compartmentalization is a frequent thing here, that you get a lot of feedback and you just shove it all down in front of a very high volumed something like live TV, and it could be overwhelming, and it comes out later after you go home and all kind of the shield goes off and you just have to reprocess those things. But I also think it's poignant at this moment where you are right now, because you speak about your friend in your book. And I'm understanding where you are and the fact that he does what a lot of us do to, figure out our maybe stress, and that is surfing. So what is some discoveries on stress and performance that you kind of researched from your background?
I actually decided to write the book because I was stressed at work and I was stressing about stressing as well. And so I decided to talk to a sports psychologist, and he told me about his story of his best match ever, which started an exploration in sports psychology, because it turns out he lost that match, which is fascinating, right? This is my best match ever, but he happened to lose it. But it was his best match because he was playing a much stronger opponent and made huge progress in his playing ability during that game. He remembers everything about that game. It was like 10 years ago. That mindset I found very appealing. And this notion that we should all go around in life with zero stress is completely misguided.
Mm-hmm.
And what you learn from sports psychology is not only is zero stress, basically impossible because we're all human beings, it's not optimal for performance. So optimal performance actually happens at a certain activation level. So stress will increase performance up to a point after which stress is detrimental and you choke and it's unhealthy. But this sports psychology concept that optimal performance does not occur at zero stress, and sports psychologists have this really neat way of reframing stress. They call it activation, for example, right? So using it as a source of performance. And you start thinking about this and you think like, do I want my surgeon to be zero stress about the surgery? It's difficult. It requires a lot of concentration. I want her to prepare. I want her to be engaged in the surgery she's about to perform. And so, it's task specific, which is really interesting. So to run a 100-meter sprint, you can perform at your optimal level at very high stress and activation. For archery, which is more of a precise thing, more complex, you're going to achieve peak performance at a lower part of the stress curve, at a lower stress level. And then you and I and everybody, we have different stress curves. So this is called the Yerkes-Dodson's curves. It turns out there's about 80 years of research on them. And to me, it was incredibly liberating, right? Working in the high stress world of money management to realize, hey, I might actually need a certain level of stress to perform at a certain level. I found that just at least I removed the second layer from stressing about stressing. I removed that second layer.
That's good.
And it's really helped me a ton. I think it can help anybody in life in just not adding that second layer of stress.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to understand where your stress level is, for one, and also what happens in the aftermath in a way that, like, for an artist, so to speak, on stage, and you get this, it's stressful to get there and perform in front of everybody, and you get your inner workings going on, and then the expertise on everyone else kind of is hitting, and you get this crescendo moment, this high, and then it drops off. And now the stress may be depleted, like you're on vacation right now. When stress kind of understands the slowdown method, then what comes out is exactly what you said. The slowdown method, you get sick. And as a healer, I totally understand that now the stress level has gotten to a different place, and now I'm sick, you mentioned, for 1 year. And how to recalibrate out of that to differentiate the stress level that you're talking about, the stress on stress, the combined stress. And I wanted to discuss a little bit about control theory to the rescue. What is this and how does it work?
So control theory is about decision making. It's actually used in engineering and science, but in the psychology of leadership, I use it to highlight something I called strategic patience. So here's what control theory is with respects to psychology and decision making. It's a set of rules that helps you make adjustments over time based on the unpredictable nature of the world, right? You and I could set goals. We want this podcast to be, we want 1 million people to listen to this podcast, and unpredictable things will happen and it might or might not go viral. But this control theory helps you to adjust along the way in your decisions, and it helps you frame your decisions. And that's where I introduce strategic patience, because we think of the ideal leader as the decision maker who makes decisions quickly and makes the right decisions. But some of the best leaders I've worked with were the best at exercising strategic patience, which is when you have time to make a decision,
Mhm.
you should use that time. Often situations will resolve themselves.
Mhm.
Often you will learn something that will be useful to making a better decision.
Mhm.
And so, yes, as the time ticks, your standards can go down and you have to make a decision. But in a lot of cases, an underrated business skill or life skill is
Mhm.
strategic patience. We all have the bias to make the decision quickly. Everybody
Mhm.
want to make the decision because we want to make it go away.
Yeah.
But in so many cases, not all cases, sometimes you do need to make a quick decisions.
Mhm.
But in so many cases, it helps to just wait it out. Two people come to you with a conflict and they want you to resolve the conflict between the two of them. If you want to empower them,
Mhm.
don't jump to solve every single interaction they're having with each other. Exercise strategic patience, and
Mhm.
you'll see that they'll start working towards, hopefully, towards resolving conflicts with each other. If you have 10 months to hire someone,
Mhm.
because someone's retiring in 10 months, for example, why would you take 2 weeks,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And we're tempted to just hire the first good person to come in.
Mhm.
But strategic patience means you take advantage of the time you have left. And it's interesting because control theory, which is more of a mathematical model,
Mhm.
has a way of modeling strategic patience. Like you can actually use it to model how you can take advantage of time for making decisions. But in business, you'd be amazed how rarely that question gets asked. That how much time do we have left to make the decision?
Yeah,
That
smart
question
question.
does not get asked nearly enough. Such a simple question.
Yeah, because in your mind, you start thinking. And this is what highly intellectual people like yourself deal with overthinking everything. And I'm included in that bracket that you start to overthink all these possibilities where the actualities are minimum to the actual result of what's going to come to pass. And then sitting in it in a way, patience, and not trying to resolve everyone else's issues that they will resolve themselves in time, you hope, or you can be a mediator if you need to, but that's not, you have to gauge, the interactions and where it sits and how, the people are doing in general.
Yeah, and oh my God, you mentioned analysis paralysis. In my world, we have this analysis paralysis often, and strategic patience doesn't mean paralysis at all, but overthinking sometimes is a problem as well. Look, I think the point, and I get pushback sometimes when I talk about strategic patience at work because
Mm.
people will say we need to make quick decisions, we need to lead, we need to innovate, we need to be first to market.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yes, that's true. But if you develop the skill to simply ask, how much time do we have left to make this decision? And I think that's a life skill, it's not just a business skill.
Yes.
And to use that time to your advantage,
Mhm.
I think you build an edge. But again, the answer sometimes is we don't have much more time to make that decision. We need to make it now. And
Yeah.
then you free the mental space to make those urgent and important decisions because you've created space by delaying exercising strategic patience where you do have time to make the decision. So the triage is key.
Yeah, making sure you have all the elements before you go into making a decision is also important, timeline and understanding because you're in a experience where the market changes immediately, social trends change immediately, people's perspectives. We have, which I'm going to touch on right now, about the idea of people's limited attention spans and how small they are. And we call it the fish concept. You got 10 seconds and it's up. And that's true with music. If you want to send your music to a new or anything like that, you have about 10 to 15 seconds before it hits and they say, that should be good or it could be good. So separating signal from noise. What are a few things to understand in the value of implementation of Principle 13 in your book?
Well, first of all, on the short attention span, I could not agree more. I'm working with my team by asking them, what's the elevator pitch?
Yes.
You're on floor 2 of the elevator and
Mm-hmm.
someone walks in and they're getting off on floor 4. What
Mm-hmm.
are you going to tell them about this new investment strategy you've built? And that's a way to try to address the short attention span. But I think decisiveness is overrated in a sense. And as this circles back to strategic patience, I also think that leaders can develop ability to, when I say separate signal from noise, it's really important to understand when you're getting so much information and
Mm-hmm.
some of it you should ignore. And this is money management. Like, it's unbelievable the amount of research and information we receive every day. Signals, news cycles, politics, macro data. I have dashboards. If you looked at my computer screens, it's all information. I'm getting bombarded as an investor by information.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the signal? And what's the noise?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the role of a money manager. But also, broadly speaking, in terms of leadership, I used to overreact to noise, I would say. For example, with office politics or workplace politics,
Yes.
I would hear a little something that might be opposite to my ideas or my goals,
Mm-hmm.
and I would clearly overreact to it.
Mm-hmm.
My old boss used to tell me that I heard high frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
So what he meant by that is, how dogs, like, they
Mm-hmm.
hear noise frequencies that are even higher than humans. So
Uh-huh.
he's hypersensitive to this. And I used to tell him, well, it's not paranoia if people really are after you. But that was not constructive, right? I was just overreacting to signals, overreacting to noise, thinking there are signals. And I've learned to assume good intentions. I think that's a better way to think about filtering signal from noise. But sometimes it's signal. And that the type of error that we made around COVID, I
Mm-hmm.
talk about this in the book. But, you know, for a while, for a couple weeks, we kept comparing the cases in Wuhan
Oh,
to the
uh-huh.
bird flu, right? So we had prior experience with diseases that would spread,
Mm-hmm.
and we were counting the number of cases and then comparing that to the bird flu. And, we were kind of off. So the world, I think, in general, in the early days, we were receiving signal, but we interpreted it as quote unquote noise,
Mm-hmm.
with respect to how bad it got in terms of contagion and all the issues and the reactions to it. So that's an example of when it's actually noise.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a signal, and you're interpreting it as noise. So big part of decision making, signal versus noise, and decision making under uncertainty is
Mm-hmm.
where this is most important.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to understand the difference. And like, I'm lucky enough, sometimes I use my gut to react and to interpret things is an alert to my body that something is needing my attention that I am not paying attention to. And it is a very important element, but it's also ignored that your health does not play as much of a role sometimes for people when you're working and continuing to process and doing the best you can and striving for achievements, like going back to your body and knowing what something is very important that you need to be paying attention to, your intuition, because you have to have some element of that to make certain decisions if you can listen to it, in my experience. But I also want to go back to one question, creating your operation system and identifying your management of core beliefs. You just mentioned something right there about talking about your interpretation. My mother has what we call bat hearing. So she can hear you anywhere you are because she has really good perceptions on hearing, but sometimes it's not the right words that you're interpreting. It's some illusion or and how your inner work goes. Can you mention a little bit about the aspects on wanting to prepare someone for leadership based on their core values and the understanding of identification of themselves.
Core beliefs, we all have them. They represent how we interpret the world. So earlier I said that I would hear high frequencies. I wasn't a good core belief. A better core belief I mentioned was assume good intentions,
Mhm.
but we all have them, and they can be from how we grew up. For example, psychology really likes to analyze people's core beliefs, but when
Mhm.
it comes to business and leadership, it's super important to just take a moment to examine your core beliefs because, like in my example, some of them might not be productive.
Mhm.
This is how you're interpreting. You think people are up to, they're out to get you, for example. That's a
Mhm.
core belief, right? Maybe because you were betrayed some time ago in a really major way, and now that's become a core belief. People are out to get me.
Mm.
But that's not productive.
Yes.
And you can do that on your own. You can do that with a loved one, like just talking about your core beliefs and identifying those that aren't productive. Because as a leader, I've gone through leadership transitions where I receive feedback that's coming from all over the place, and
Mm.
it forces me, it puts my core beliefs in my face, and it forces me to evaluate them and identify those that are productive and those that are not productive. So it's sort of like brew yourself a big cup of coffee and just think about your core beliefs and which ones are productive, or talk to someone.
Mm.
Um, Teams have core beliefs, companies have core beliefs, right?
Mhm.
In our business, a core belief is that whatever we do in terms of investment management,
Mhm.
it needs to benefit the person who's saving for retirement, right? So
Mhm.
everything we do has to be additive. It has to make money for someone who's accumulating money to retire comfortably or to pay their bills or send their kids to college. Now, that's a core belief in our mission, or you could also call it a value, right? You mentioned core beliefs and values. But
Mhm.
so as a team, what you do is first of all, you look at how people react under stress, how people make tough decisions, and that begins to reveal some of the core beliefs that the team has. But then, if you're brave as a leader, and it can be a sports team, it can be any kind of team,
Mhm.
you convene people and you go, what are our core beliefs? Let's write them down. We believe the consumer is always right. We believe we achieve success as a team together. And be honest about those that might not be as productive.
Mhm.
Shut the phones off and have a sort of a real conversation
Mm.
about the core beliefs. A lot of companies will write them down. They'll put them up on the wall. They'll call them values. They'll call them shared beliefs. It's it blah blah blah. It seems like really soft stuff, but it actually really matters if you take them seriously and tweak them and evolve them for high performance, it's going to move the dial.
Mhm. Yeah, understanding those aspects of who you are and how your company operates and being a leader inside your company is also important to know your core understandings and your frame of mind and what you're trying to make for your mission statement, so to speak, in a way that this is kind of what you're endeavoring to create and make in your way of leadership and direction for other people, including yourself. So, what is a question that I should have asked that you feel is very important to share?
I would say I think you ask all very important and deep questions about leadership. I think I think what we didn't talk about that we could have talked about, especially given publication, your podcast, is around engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And, it sounds good. We want engagement, but how do we foster engagement? And so in the psychology of leadership, I talk about my first summer job, which was in building maintenance. It was basically, we were a crew of two people. We had to mow the lawns, paint the walls, clean the factories, sweep the parking lots. We had a pickup truck, we had equipment. It was very difficult. It wasn't fun. I wasn't engaged. I didn't have a work ethic, meaning I was lazy. I was a teenager. It was my first job.
Oh, yeah.
But some tasks I would actually get engaged and lose track of time and almost kind of like look forward to it. For example, mowing the lawns. I have a chapter where I say learn to love
Yes, you
mowing the
do.
lawn
Uh-huh.
because I was able to notice progress almost immediately. So if
Hmm.
you want to foster engagement at work, help people notice progress in a task they're making, set up the milestones.
Hmm.
We talked about relationship. Relationship is a huge part of engagement, being more engaged in your work. If you're going to work where people are having fun and they're getting along, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Why not foster more of a social aspect to work? There's nothing wrong. It might sound cheesy a little bit, but it actually is a good thing to do. You know, want to get to know people as people and get along and have fun together. So I think we didn't touch on engagement. We could have a whole other conversation on that, but
No.
you foster engagement by providing feedback, showing people the progress they're making, by focusing on positive relationships at work that helps with engagement. You can almost like gamify the work, right? Any
Hmm.
work. And paying attention to the mission and paying attention to the work that helps with engagement as well. So that was a little part of PERMA we didn't cover as much, but I thought important as one of the last things we could discuss.
Yeah, I think it was a really important addition in that way because I wanted to lead that direction. We took a different course, and I am proud of you to implement that understanding that we have included it as well. So, my last two questions are always first, and you kind of mentioned it before, so you can go more on that or you can pick another one. What is the best advice you've ever received?
It goes back to making a conscious effort to think long term. It's just so important to put day to day setbacks in perspective
Mm-hmm.
and to focus on what truly matters, including IRMA, engagement, positive relationships, meaning, and long term accomplishment. That is just great advice. You said something earlier in our conversation that we didn't expand on, but how small habits, small things you do every day,
Mm-hmm.
if they're the right habits, accumulate to tremendously important results over the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another aspect of thinking long term through tweaking your daily habits. Uh, in our business, in money management, when everybody's panicking and markets are selling off 20%, it's usually really important to think long term and realize that you can buy stocks at a very low price, and that from a long term perspective, it's a really good thing to do. So it's I would hit on that one as my favorite. Most, as you said, most important piece of advice I've ever gotten.
I think advice is very important for everyone to get, and it just sticks with you sometimes, and it narrates different decision-making process throughout your career or life. And that's one of like when it's glue, it sticks. And so it's just with you in a way that you kind of go forward and you think about someone's mode of thought or interpretation, or maybe for you, feedback, and was like, this one I need to keep with me because I think it's very valuable. So, what is some of the key takeaways in the hardest lesson you've ever learned? I hate the word failure, but I remind people that it could be geared towards that, but something that happened that you're like, I learned a lot from this, and what did I take away?
We touched on it. At some point in my career, I realized that I was not a good listener.
Hmm.
And I've always been excited by communication and presenting. And that pivot I had to make to reach the upper rungs of senior leadership to
Hmm.
listening. Hardest lesson to learn, most important lesson to learn. Listening is a life skill, but it's actually a leadership superpower if you can do it well.
So wise in that understanding because most people have lost that aspect that are just waiting to talk over you or beside you or say their piece in a way that they have or learn or know better than you do without listening to what someone else says to let it sit and kind of interpret it that. And I feel you because I've been in media for so long. I've talked for too many times in a way to fill the gap of space in on air that you can't have those pausing moments, but sometimes they're more thorough in a podcast and like the listening to elevate your statement that everybody is paying attention to what you said. So,
And you know what? It's counterintuitive, but if you want to convince someone of something, change their minds, Adam Grant wrote about this.
mm.
The best way is to listen attentively to them, understand their perspective.
That's what makes us human to understand everybody's journey is very different than ours. And where their journey has led us is a different interpretation and different views and core goals that you've mentioned before and how important those are, because that can broaden your perspective of the world, which I always advocate for people seeing and learning different things for different people and listening. And so applauded like skill for that. And thank you so much, Sébastien. It was an honor to have you. Please check out with the book if you want to know the psychology of leadership and endeavor to get better at your skills to be a predominantly great leader. You can also check him out on LinkedIn as he posts often, and check out his little tidbits of insight and following through with all of his portfolio management. And you're on everything, and I'm sure that everyone can find you everywhere that you're found.
Perfect. Thank you, Jasmine. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to go back to enjoying California.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Tranquility Magazine podcast. Please subscribe and add your questions to our Q&A. We want to give a thank you to our team for their effort in creating every episode and our content at tranquilitymagazine.com.